A supercomputer company and a video game giant combine to make a video game console. Let's take a look at the Nintendo 64.
What's up YouTube, Retro Gamer Gen X back again with another episode of A Look At. And in today's episode of A Look At, we're going to be taking a look at the Nintendo 64. We'll be taking a look at the history of the console, how it was developed, the developers, all that kind of good stuff. We'll be taking a look at what's inside the console, what chips, silicone, and what makes it tick. We'll be taking a 360 tour of an actual N64 console, just kind of showing you guys the ins and outs of the actual console itself. Then we'll go ahead and power one up and do some gameplay video. And at the very end of the video, I'll do a conclusion, kind of giving you my thoughts and impressions of the system itself. In between each segment as well, I put in commercials from the console, from the N64, just kind of showing you how it was marketed and how it was advertised to the consumer back in the 90s. So let's go ahead and take a look, guys.
Do you know how to use one of these?
GoldenEye. Load a rumble pack and see how it feels when 007 meets N64.
The story of the N64 really begins in the early 1990s. At this time, Nintendo knew that they would need to start development of a system to replace the Super Nintendo and enter into the next generation of consoles. This is where Silicon Graphics Incorporated, a graphics visualization and supercomputing company, comes into the picture. SGI was looking at expanding their company by putting some of their technology into consumer project. Jim Clark, founder of SGI, contacted Sega of America and spoke with Tom Kalutsky. Kalutsky was impressed with what he saw, but ultimately Sega did not buy the technology. After Sega engineers evaluated the hardware and technology, they found several issues within it. Or they said. They wanted to own it outright, and SGI was not willing to give up the rights to its own technology. After no deal was struck with Sega, Clark then spoke with CEO of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, in early 1993. Nintendo was willing to license the chipset instead of owning it outright. On August 23, 1993, Nintendo and SGI came to an agreement initiating what would be called Project Reality. Technology from Project Reality would be used in the arcades as soon as 1994 and in the home console market by 1995. Reality Emergent Technology is the name SGI had given its components used in Project Reality. Initially, Project Reality was developed into the Onyx supercomputer, costing $100,000 to $250,000 for the game development system. It was filled with Reality Engine 2 graphic boards and 4 150 MHz RISC CPUs. The APIs were based on Performer and OpenGPL. On June 23, 1994, Nintendo announced the official name of its console as the Ultra 64. Developers started signing on with Nintendo, including Rare, Acclaim, DMA Designs, Ocean, and many more. Around this time, the Project Reality team prototyped the game controller for the system. Basically, they used a SNES controller and added an analog stick with a Z button. This prototype controller eventually became the N64 controller, but the design of this controller was so secretive that once developers were using it, they had to hide it in a box after they were done. While development of the console continued, Nintendo and developers started developing games on an Onyx supercomputer-based development system. Eventually, these systems were replaced by cost-reduced SGI indie workstations, which had a fully accurate console simulation board within the system to help with the ease of development. The console was publicly revealed for the first time in 1994 and showed the console with the Nintendo Ultra 64 logo a ROM cartridge, but no controller at this time. Also in late 1994, Nintendo started licensing agreements with Midway and Williams to create arcade games based on the Ultra 64. These games were Killer Instinct and Cruising USA. Although the Ultra 64 arcade boards were based on the Ultra 64 game console, they used a different chipset with no Reality coprocessor and also used hard drives. Also around this time, Nintendo decided to go ahead and rename the game console from the Ultra 64 to the Nintendo 64. This was based on Konami, who had ownership of the Ultra Games trademark, and Nintendo was afraid that they might be sued over trademark infringement. So the name was changed to the Nintendo 64, or better known as the N64. But a cool tidbit of information is that the software and hardware on the N64 still use the NUS prefix, which stands for Nintendo Ultra 64. Originally, the N64 was slated to be released by the Christmas season of 1995. However, due to hardware problems with the chips underperforming, they had to be redesigned again. The delay went into the spring of 1996. At this time, Nintendo's software development kit was completely redesigned as a Windows-based partner N64 system by Kyoto Microcomputers. On June 23, 1996, the N64 was released in Japan, and on September 26, 1996, released in North America. The console was originally slated to be sold in the US for $250, but the launch price was reduced down to $199.99 to make it competitive with Sony and Sega. Nintendo at this point knew that Sony and Sega had basically sewed up the adult and teen market in video games, so the N64 specifically targeted preteens. The N64 was quite a successful console, selling just under 33 million units worldwide. It was eventually discontinued on April 30th, 2002. This gave the N64 a 6-year lifespan.
Good game.
Way to go. See that one guy?
What a slime.
Check out the new ride. It's
Whoa. Bummer.
Dinosaurs hate being smashed on something. Remember new Mario Tennis, only on N64 rated E.
So now we'll go over the hardware of the N64. It was powered by an NEC VR 4300 RISC CPU running at 93.75 MHz and had a performance of 125 million instructions per second. It also had a 24 kilobyte level 1 cache. The next chip we're going to talk about is the Reality coprocessor. Now, a lot of people refer to this as the GPU of the N64, but it does much more than that. The Reality coprocessor ran at a rate of 62.5 MHz, and the chip was split internally basically into two chips in one. The first being the Reality Display Processor, and the second being the Reality Signal Processor. The Reality Display Processor is a fixed pipeline rasterizer and pixel drawing engine, whereas the Reality Signal Processor handles transformations, clipping, lighting, calculations, and triangle setups. It also produced the sound for the N64 as it did not have its own dedicated sound chip. It could support up to 100 channels of sound at a sampling rate of 48 kHz. But since the sound shared resources with other parts of the system, 100 voice channels would never be accomplished unless it was for purely just sound and no video. The Reality coprocessor in itself can display resolutions from 320 by 240 up to 640 by 480 pixels. The N64 also had 4.5 megabytes of RDRAM, which is RAM bus DRAM, running at 250 megahertz, 4 megabytes of which were used specifically by the CPU, whereas the other half of a megabyte was used directly by the Reality coprocessor for anti-aliasing and Z buffering. System RAM is also expandable up to 8 megabytes with the RAM expansion pack sold separately.
It's all in the head movement. To the body. Wait there. There's a process. Guide with your arm. Not bad. But you gotta work on your follow through.
Ready for a tongue lashing? Yoshi's Loose with juicier levels, tastier moves, and dripping with attitude. Yoshi's Story for the first time on N64.
I think you got in the hang of.
Okay, guys, here's an actual N64 console here. So basically here on the top, you got your cartridge slot right here. You got your power on and off button, your reset button. And here, this is that additional memory RAM expansion pack. So this gives you more RAM for your system as well. So some games do require that. Now it does have 4 controller ports in the front, starting with controller port 1, 2, 3, and 4. Nothing really on the sides or on the bottom. Nothing down there. Now, like every Nintendo system, it does have an expansion bay.
but it was really never used. So, fun times with that. And then on the back here we have the AV out. So this is where your AV cables come out of. And then there's this big old like power brick thing that sticks in here and plugs in here. I'll show it to you guys in a second. But that's for your power. So instead of having a big brick plugging into your wall, it actually plugs right into the back of the console. Kind of a odd design, but you know, it works. And having it that big and be able to put it in like you do probably made it a lot easier for kids and not breaking things. But this is it right here. This is the actual power brick. See, this is where it plugs into the back of the console there. And you just kind of press this down and pull out, and it pops right out. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get this thing hooked up and we'll do some gameplay video.
Is it here yet?
No.
Is it here yet?
Nope.
Is it here yet?
No.
Is it here yet?
No.
Is it here yet?
No.
Is it here yet?
Let me check. No.
Is it here yet?
Pokemon Stadium 2 will be here on March 28th. Until then, $10 reserves your copy and gets you a collector's edition poster with tons of Pokemon. So you'll be ready to battle with your gold and silver characters in 3D.
Cool. Is it here yet?
No.
Rated E for everyone.
Alright guys, so we got the N64 all hooked back up here with 007 GoldenEye in here. So let's go ahead and power it on and see what she does. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and dive right into gameplay video here guys. So let's go ahead and do that.
me, Mario. Hello. Let's go.
Locasana. The game begins. There is carnage ahead, and for the victor, there is honor and the spoils of battle. For the vanquished, there is pain and humiliation. Failure is not an option for the Forsaken.
The crushing pound of a mallet. The shattering blow of the club. The slashing edge of the blade. They call to you. Mortal Kombat 4. Darkness is calling.
Alright guys, so that brings us to the end of the video and to the conclusion here where I give you my impressions and my thoughts about the system. So the N64, I can't say I grew up with the system because I was already grown up and moved out of the house by the time this system came out. But I did have some friends that ended up buying the system, so I'd go over to their house and play it. And, you know, honestly, I was a little impressed with how powerful it was for being a cartridge-based system. But really, it was, I still saw it as kind of like a toy. It was marketed towards kids. But as far as like the games go on the system, like I said, I didn't really play anything besides GoldenEye. I went over there to my friend's house. We loved that game. I remember playing that game for hours and hours and hours. It was just such a great game. But other than that, I didn't really play any other N64 games until later on when I started collecting systems. I started playing like Mario 64 and a few other games on the system, but really still never got into it. I have a few cartridges, but I haven't bought a flash card for the system because I've never really gotten into it. I have a PlayStation, I have a Sega Saturn, you know, that were from the same generation, which in my mind blew away the Nintendo 64. But that's just my opinion. But anyway, guys, that's about it for the video here. I don't want to keep you guys too long. But I did want to thank all my subs and everybody watching, all my viewers out there. You guys are the ones that support this channel. If you haven't subbed, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Click like as well if you like the content. And if you did sub and you want to get those little notifications whenever I drop new content, don't forget to hit that bell as well. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have a good one. Peace out.